Welcome back to the Terrorverse TV for another episode on national holidays. Today we're going to talk about the 4th of July or Independence Day, not the movie with Will Smith, okay? As you know, I've been doing these little videos on national holidays sort of to remind people of the history and the meaning, and sometimes I share some of my experiences from my past. Today, I'm going to read some historical notes briefly just to give people the context, and then I'm going to share what I think are some, and I hope you will find it to be some kind of entertaining stories about my own history with Independence Day. So let me just read a few notes here. I'm not so good at doing these off the top of my head or a teleprompter, so forgive me if I read from a piece of paper, but let's talk about Independence Day. It's commonly known as the 4th of July. It's a federal holiday in the United States. It commemorates the Declaration of Independence, which was adopted by the Continental Congress on July 4th, 1776. This document declared that the 13 American colonies were no longer subject to the British monarchy and are now united, free, and independent states. In the early tensions in the Revolutionary War, the origins of the Independence Day trace back to 1760s, 1770s, when there was the tensions between the colonies and the British government. There was disputes over taxation. You remember the Boston Tea Party, and political and economic issues that led to the outbreak of the American Revolutionary War in April 1775. By mid-1776, the movement for independence had gained considerable momentum, and on July 2nd, 1776, the Continental Congress voted in favor of Richard Henry Lee's resolution for independence. 2 days later, on July 4th, Independence Day, the Congress formally adopted the Declaration of Independence, primarily authored by Thomas Jefferson. And the first celebrations took place in 1777, marked by spontaneous events such as bonfires, concerts, and the firing of cannons and muskets. These early celebrations reflected the joy and the newfound freedom of the American people. It wasn't until 1870 that the U.S. Constitution made Independence Day an unpaid holiday for federal employees, and then in 1938, it changed it to a federal paid holiday, solidifying its importance in American culture and history. Today, I think people will know that Independence Day is typically celebrated with various activities that reflect the American culture and history, including fireworks, parades, concerts, barbecues, and political speeches. Firework displays are particularly notable and held in many cities across the country. They've replaced, obviously, the cannons and the muskets, with some of the largest displays taking in New York City, which I hope to watch myself, Washington, D.C., and Boston. So Independence Day not only commemorates the birth of our country as an independent nation, but also serves as a reminder of the values of freedom and democracy upon which the country was founded. It's a day for Americans to reflect on their history, celebrate their freedoms, and honor those who fought for the country's independence. I always want people to remember that our freedoms and our democracy and our way of life in America was hard fought by blood of many, many people, and we should never forget that. And the service that they did to us is something that you should keep in mind on almost all of these holidays. So let's stop there. That was my little spiel on the history. I hope it was helpful for those of you who thought Independence Day was the movie with Will Smith and forgot that it was part of our secession from Britain. But in any event, I just want to share a few stories from my past. For me, Independence Day, or we typically call it July 4th, was one of the best holidays of the year. It's right up there with the sort of, the Christmas, Thanksgiving area of holidays, and also Memorial Day, which is another big day for me as a veteran. But July 4th was pretty special because it's the big holiday of the summer. You're right smack dab in the summer. School's out, so when you were in grammar school and high school, you just get out of school at the end of June, and the first big weekend of the year was July 4th, and it was, a great big barbecue. I think almost everyone I know celebrated the 4th of July with a big barbecue, picnic, or whatever, and almost every town in America has some sort of fireworks display. So I enjoyed that when I was a kid. We went to there was our football field. That's where they held the fireworks. Everyone would go there, sit on blankets and chairs, and when it got dark, they would have the fireworks, and there would be a bunch of vendors around with hot dogs and hamburgers and sodas and the like. And for kids, it was just the greatest thing ever to go there every summer. And it was one of the times where your parents kind of let you run free a little bit, so you didn't have the normal parental supervision, and you could have a fun time. As I got older, in high school, or towards the end, it was either the end of high school or right after high school. I can't remember exactly. I was 17, 18 at the time. I moved in. I moved out of my house when I was 17 to make room for some other of my brothers to take over my bed. There was 10 of us, so we only had 2 bedrooms, so we had to kind of get out when we were old enough to be on our own. So 17, I moved out after high school, and I lived with a good friend of mine who lived in his grandparents' farmhouse. It's like the only plot of land in Derby that was sort of grass. It was at the top of a hill next to a reservoir that provided the drinking water for the area. And it was a nice little property, not big, and it didn't work as a farm anymore. They had gardens and stuff, but it was no longer a working farm. But it had a barn, and it had a little tiny house that my friend and I lived in. It was just 2 little bedrooms and a wood burning stove. It was kind of cool, for a bunch of young kids. It was kind of cool. But we decided, or I decided actually, I love 4th of July, so I said, hey, let's throw a party here. I played like in a high school band, garage band, and we knew a lot of musicians, so it was no problem. We would get 2 bands, okay? So I guess I became a concert promoter at a very young age. We'd always have at least 2 bands, because I had a lot of friends that played in bands, and they were really good, by the way. And we'd have, we started out with probably 50, 70 people, and we would buy a few kegs of beer and, some hot dogs and hamburgers and chips and the like, because I had a job and my friend also had a job. He worked with his father. They were woodworkers, fantastic furniture makers. So we actually were probably the only kids in our cohort that had enough money to buy a couple kegs and the food. And we throw these parties, and it was fantastic. And then the problem was every year, the word would get out, and the party got bigger and bigger and bigger. So after about 2 or 3 years, maybe 4, I don't even remember how many years, it wasn't that long, but the party got out of control. We had 400 or 500 people. It was like a mini Woodstock up there on the farm. We didn't know half the people. We had biker gangs. We had every kind of group coming up there because once they heard about free beer, free hot dogs, and free music, in my neighborhood that's something highly sought after because no one had any money. People would roll up. Now the good news, we didn't have a lot of fights, and no one was ever hurt. Because people were pretty happy with the food and the drinks and the music, and plus I had some pretty tough friends, and and I wasn't such a little slouch myself, but we kind of held our own. We policed our property pretty well, and we didn't have any trouble. But one year, and I'll never forget this because it was so bizarre. To this day I can't believe it actually happened because it doesn't make any sense. One year we're going into the party's raging. Oh yeah, and by the way, the kind of parties used to go all night. So the next morning we'd have to, we'd find people sleeping out all over the farm, dew on their face and whatever. It was quite a party. People stayed up all night. It was a lot of fun. But one year we were right in the middle of the early stages of the party, and the guys, actually there was women and men. There was a whole crew of ATF, alcohol, tobacco, and firearms people showed up. And they have their, if you've ever seen the FBI with the windbreakers, they had the ATF windbreakers. And they all show up. Now, I got to tell you, I was scared to death. I had no idea what they're going to do, what we were doing. I'm looking around saying, okay, we don't have any guns, we don't, tobacco, if the people had cigarettes, they were illegal. So it had to be about the alcohol. And I'm figuring, okay, what's going on here with alcohol? We're not doing anything wrong. And what we had done, we used to print up these little tickets, for people when we tried to control the size, but that didn't work. And it had, had the address, it had the party, and if you had a ticket, you could come in. Of course, that never worked because there's always 5 times as many people who had tickets. And frankly, after about 10 minutes of collecting tickets, I got tired of that and just let people come in. But anyway, somebody had gotten this ticket. Somebody at the ATF had seen these tickets, and we didn't charge anything. But we said, look, if you want to donate, you can donate, $5 to the beer fund or the food fund, but it wasn't required, and we didn't enforce it. And frankly, to tell you the truth, pretty much no one did. I paid for it. My buddy John paid for it. People were not desperate to throw out the $5 unless they were required to. So they came up to me, and we're talking to them. They started saying, "Look, you don't have a license. You can't sell alcohol. You could go to jail." And I said, "But we're not selling alcohol." I said, "I bought the kegs, and everyone here is of age, and we're not breaking any laws." And so they kind of went around a little bit, tried to scare us, and really wanted to make sure we were not running sort of an illegal, concert venue where we're selling tickets and actually selling alcohol, which I understand is an issue, and I don't blame them for checking on it. But I got to tell you, as an 18, 19-year-old kid throwing just a keg party, it was pretty scary, but it was a lot of fun. And we used to have a lot of fireworks. That we started with the fireworks. And then I went in the military, and I sort of, did some time in Texas, 8 years in Texas, and sort of, I couldn't do those parties there, but we had plenty of fun stuff in the military. Always did really great events for the 4th of July. And so I wasn't required to put on, or I didn't feel the need to put on the parties when I was in Texas. But then when I came back, I went to college. Some people may know I shared this in other posts, but I went to college, and then I went to law school. And then I started working as a corporate lawyer in New York, and that didn't leave a lot of time for much for the next, I'd say, 20 years. So then around about 2000, maybe about 10 years. So about 10 years after I got out of law school, around 2000, I bought a house up in Connecticut with a nice big piece of property, 12 acres, sort of fenced in, all open, and I had a swimming pool, and I kind of built this house for my family because all my family was living around the area. I actually built a couple other houses for my sisters and brothers so they all could move up on the hill. I'll give you another funny anecdote. Hope people don't get too mad at me, but we used to call it Dago Mountain because in the town we were probably the only Italians, and they were all bunched in one little enclave at the top of the mountain around my house. And I used to joke with people that we had to get special visas to have more than two Italians on the same block. But it was a lot of fun, and I loved the town, and we had a good relationship up there, except for the 4th of July. Because once I got this house, I'm like a huge firework fanatic. I love fireworks. I just cannot get enough fireworks. And I started to buy these massive pallets of the really big ones, 3, 4, 5 inch. They call them they don't call them rockets. I'll think of it as shells. They're like artillery shells, and that's actually what they call them. And I used to get these from, I think I used to get them all the way from Missouri. I used to have them shipped over here, and I'd buy, pallet full of fireworks. And I'd invite the whole neighborhood, all of my family, and believe me, no one ever missed my 4th of July party because it was the event of the year. I had food, I had an outdoor kitchen, food, alcohol, sodas, games, and it was just a full weekend event, and everyone would show up, and I'd have usually about 150 people there, and then I would have the firework display at the end of the night, and it was spectacular. But every year, the local police and fire department would show up outside my gates. Now, the good thing is my property was completely fenced in, and it had gates on it, so you couldn't get in. So they would ring the gate and the doorbell. Of course, we never answered it because if they didn't have a warrant we're not going to knock down my gates, we just didn't let them in until we finished with the fireworks. And then they would sit out there and they'd be flashing their lights, and they would be upset, but they didn't do anything about it. So that went on for, I don't know, at least 4 or 5 years where they were just annoyed at me because we were doing these fireworks. But even though, to be sort of fair, there was a lot of other people around there doing it. There was a guy right down the street from my house who was a fireman, and all the cops and firemen used to go to his house, and we kind of had a little competition going between his house and my house with the fireworks, but they didn't bother him. But of course, they wanted to shut me down. So that went on for a few years, and then one year I remember coming up from New York on a couple weeks before the 4th, getting my party prep going. And the chief of police from my town called me on my cell phone. Don't ask me how they got my number, but they did. And they said, listen, we love your fireworks. Your fireworks are better than the cities. Everyone loves them because I lived at the top of the very highest point in the city. So, my fireworks you could see from everywhere. And they said, they're really nice. They're really great, but it's against the law and we have to do something about it. And if you do it again this year, we're going to knock down your gate and we're going to put a stop to it this time. I said, okay. I said, that's not good. I said, I didn't think you would be so worried about fireworks. I said, you see my property, nothing could go wrong. I have plenty of room here. And by the way, I said, the fire department's here every year anyway. So if anything was to go wrong, you guys are hanging out there. It won't be a problem. But she goes, no, you can't. I mean, the chief was a man. No, you can't do it. It's really embarrassing for us. We're going to have to put a stop to it. I said, so, okay, well, is there any way I could get a permit? Because they actually do have permits. She goes, yeah, here's the process. You have to pay for police, firemen, have to be there, so you have to pay all of them. You have to get the permit from the city, and you have to get it from the state police. So I said, okay, great, I'll do it. So I went through the process. I got it from the city, and oh, by the way, you have to hire something called a shooter. Okay, a shooter is a person who's qualified to shoot off those shells, the fireworks. So you have to actually get them. There's only a few of them, and they're all out of New Jersey, and and you have to buy the fireworks from them, which is sort of a mafia front company, in my view. And that's the only way you could get them. And so I went, and I paid 3 times as much, for the shells and for the fireworks, and hired the shooter. And then I went, to get my permit from the state police, and they wouldn't issue it. Or they were going to issue it, but they kept delaying it to the point where it was going to be past the 4th of July. So I decided, well, heck, I'm just going to drive up there, right? And I'm going to just sit in the guy's office and get it done. So I do that. And he makes me sit out there for, 2 hours. I'm sitting up in Wethersfield, Connecticut, where the state police barracks was and headquarters. And I'm sitting there and waiting. And finally he comes out and he starts to say, we heard all about you. We know you're the guy that does all these illegal fireworks. And, we're not sure we're going to be able to get this through in time for this year. And I said, come on, I'm here. I'm complying with the law. I'm doing what you want me to do. I got my whole family coming up. It's the 4th. Everybody loves fireworks. I couldn't convince this guy. So I went home pretty depressed. Didn't have I already paid for the shooter. I already had, good things I had, not that I planned on it, because I had already bought my fireworks before I hired the shooter. So I already had my garage full of fireworks anyway. And I was very depressed because here it was going to be our first year, big 4th of July party and no fireworks, which, the kids love them, and not to have them for the kids, I felt really bad. So that night we're going through there, and we're having our normal party. Everyone's still pretty happy, and it's starting to get close to dusk, and I'm really depressed. And everyone's like, "Oh, come on, John, don't worry about it. And I said, this is baloney. It's just wrong. I said, I did everything possible to get this done and get it done right. I was willing to pay for all these guys. Matter of fact, I had already set up an outdoor tent outside of my gate for the firemen and for the police officers. I had beer and sodas and food for them. So, I was going to really make it a nice time. So even though they had to sit there for, through the stuff, that they would, have a little bit of 4th for themselves, 4th of July. And I had it all set up. And, of course, the cops and the firemen up there loved me. I mean, I knew a lot of them, and I used to have them at my house for lots of things. But they just couldn't get through the, your bureaucracy, and they couldn't just let me do it. So when it got sort of dark, my nephew, who's a bit of a instigator, and one of my friends who's a big instigator, they said, why don't we just do it anyway? We used to time it, so we knew it took 14 minutes for the police to show up from the barracks to the top of my hill. Would take 14 minutes. So we figured out, okay, in order to get all these fireworks off in 14 minutes, we basically have to have 3 rows of shells. And we have to have 3 guys lighting them simultaneously, one after another. And my yard was the size of about 3 football fields. So they were going to run like 300 yards, and they were going to just keep shooting them off. And we figured out we could probably get it done in about, 10 minutes. And so I said, all right, let's do it. And then I also was worried that they were going to knock down my fence. So I said, okay, I'll deal with that. I just, my gates, I have a big backhoe. I had a big property, so I had a backhoe, and I had all kinds of equipment. I just pulled my backhoe up, and I backed it up against my gates. I said, yeah, let them kind of, they're going to have to, they better have a tank because they're not going to get over my backhoe. So I brought that up there, put that there, and I gave my nephew and my friends, there were three of them, I gave them, and my brother, my crazy brother, younger brother, Paulie, they went out there with their little, lighters that you use for barbecues and stuff, and they just let it go. So we had a 10-minute or 12-minute, it kind of ended up a little bit longer. You know how a finale of the fireworks are where everything's going off at once? Well, we did our whole show as one big finale. There was nothing but fireworks, crazy amount of fireworks. So many fireworks that when we were done, there was about a 10-foot high cloud of smoke that you couldn't even see through. So you couldn't see like 10 feet in front of you. The entire property was just this low-hanging cloud of smoke from all of the fireworks. And of course, then the police show up, then the fire department shows up, and they're all pretty ticked off, but all the fireworks are done. All they saw was this, smoke, and they're flashing their lights through the fence, and they want to come in. I says, look, what are you talking about? There's no fireworks here. And they were pretty ticked. And then I think that was the last year I did it, because then after that, I sort of gave up trying to fight them. They were not going to give me a permit, and it ended my joyful 4th of July, extravaganzas, which I still love. And that's why now wherever the greatest firework display is going to be, like I think it's going to be on the west side tonight at near Hudson Yards. So, I'll be out there checking out the fireworks here, and hopefully I'll have a pretty good time. The problem is I won't be there with the 150 of my family and friends, which was really quite a thing to do. And that's why I did these parties, because at the end of the day, that's one way I can be sure I could see my family and my friends. They would all come up. No one would book 4th of July other than at my house, because everyone knew the kind of party it was going to be. And now today, I don't see half of my siblings on the 4th of July, or maybe I don't even see any of them sometimes. I barely see my friends. So I guess the net of that is, try to get together with your friends and family on the 4th of July. Celebrate our independence. It's a big deal for us as a country. It's a big deal for our people. And all of you are going to see almost all of my little, videos here are going to be about family and friends and reconnecting, because that's, to me, is the most important thing in life. And if you can use a holiday as the premise for doing so, then please do so. And at the same time, remember, how great it is to be an American. Many people have died for that, and don't forget those. So that's my little story. I hope you found it interesting, and I'm sorry if you missed my 4th of July parties. They were legendary, and maybe someday I'll reinstitute it before I pass over to the other side, but we'll see. I do love 4th of July. I hope you do too, and please get out there with your family and friends and celebrate the independence of our country. Thank you.